For all you guys, you absolutely 100% know my guest today, but this is really, I mean, these are my favorite people on the planet Earth. Okay, I just have to lead with that. I was nervous. I wore red today for Canada because it's all about Canada today. And bless my heart. I know I've heard you say that so many times, Brian. But Brian, Orser, and Tracy Wilson, I've spent an obscene amount of time with them over the years. So there'll probably be a couple laughs in there that probably we shouldn't explain, but that's okay too. Just because, that's kind of the way it goes. But Brian, I'll start with Brian, even though it should be ladies first. Brian is probably right now known as much for his coaching success as he was for his incredible skating success. 8-time Canadian champion, 8 is my favorite number, and I'm sure it is yours as well. World champion, 2-time Olympic silver medalist, and a 3-time Olympic gold medal winning coach. And that's 3 in a row, by the way. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, 3 in a row. I don't know how many people have done that. Has anyone ever done that? I know you have.
Maybe Carla Fonsi.
So no, I think he had 2. No, he did. Yeah, he had 76 with Dorothy, 80 with, no. He only had 3 in 2 Olympics, but never 3 Olympics in a row. Because he dumped me as a student. Otherwise, I never.
Otherwise, exactly.
And then Tracy, who I've spent a lot of time with, just again, she's known as much for her work in television as she was for her years on the ice with partner Rob McCall. They were 7-time Canadian champions, 3-time world's bronze medalists, and bronze at the Calgary Olympics. She's covered countless Olympics on television and won 2 Gemini Awards. One for Best Sports Analyst and the other was for Game Analyst. I bet you didn't know that I knew that, Tracy.
I know. I did not.
I'm a big fan. I'm a huge fan. So I got, here would be like the normal first question, but it's such a dumb one because, okay, here's the first question that I would always want because our skaters are skaters and they want to learn more about icons in the sport. And it's like, how did you start skating? But you're Canadian. So that's like the dumbest question I could ever ask. Everybody skates in Canada. But I mean, Brian, you're the youngest of 5. What brought you to the ice?
We were all involved in sports. And so I was involved in hockey, of course, like every Canadian boy. And just quite simply, I couldn't skate. I was a terrible skater, so my parents put me into figure skating. My mother was the president of the figure skating club, so at one point all my kids skated, and it was just easy for her to go to the rink and just plop us all on the ice for the hour, and she could have an hour to herself with some of her friends, and so and then so it was just basically to improve my hockey, because that's how I got into skating.
Well, that's awesome. I loved your mom.
The hockey was terrible.
He and I were good buds. Yeah, we were.
I know.
Good friends. And Tracy, I know that you were into like swimming and diving in Port Moody, British Columbia. I love that.
But Scott, I lived from the time I was a baby until I was 6 years old in Alberta, in a place called Edmonton, and so the winter
skating there.
Were very cold. So my mom would go and freeze over the backyard. And she'd put skates on my feet and my brother Ian, and she'd pack us a little lunch, and we would just go out and play and skate outside all day. So that's how I started. And then of course I did all kinds of sports, but really the whole goal for my parents was to keep me busy and out of their hair, really.
But the crazy thing was, I mean, with all of that, I mean, the other sports, tell me about the other sports that you were in, because I know you were competing at a provincial level or a sectional level in swimming and diving, right?
Swimming and diving, that's right. So I swam competitively and skated until I was 10 or 11. And I would also dive just on the side for fun, but I blew out my knee when I was about 13. And it was healing nicely. I had to take a year off the ice. And after about 8 months, so I was into the summer season. I still couldn't skate. But I swam that year, and I also dove competitively. And I guess there weren't a lot of divers in British Columbia because I made it to the provincials. But there you go.
But who
And
knew,
I was
right?
a fan of rugby. I was a rugby rat because my dad coached rugby and my brother played rugby. And so I grew up on the rugby pitch on the weekends when I wasn't at a skating rink. So I had a really nice cross-section of sports in my life.
And, you know, you married a rugby player too, which
There
is,
you go.
you know,
There
yeah,
you
meant
go.
to be, right? You
All's
needed to have
well
that
that ends
knowledge.
well.
Still going, by the way. You know, I don't want
That's
anybody to think
right.
that one's over. So skating was like it. I mean, you got right into it. And Brian, like, you know, when did you know that you were going to go from hockey and then totally go into figure skating?
I can actually tell you exactly when that was, because we had our little club carnival at the end of the season, which we had every year, especially with some of those small clubs in, well, I guess all over the world, actually. So we had our little carnival, and our guest skater was Donald Jackson. And
Ooh, legend.
I know. And so, you know, he's a world champion, Olympic medalist. And I got to do a solo in this carnival. So we did.
As a hockey player. Nice.
Well, no, the theme was a trip around the world. And so I was the pilot and the only boy. So, so it was a pretty easy audition. And so I got the part. And then I got to share the ice because all the little solo skaters got to practice with Donald Jackson. And he saw that I had some talent, and he talked to my parents and said, you know, your boy's pretty good and you should think about getting some lessons. Because I was not getting lessons. I was just kind of recreation skating, you know. So I was, I think, 8 years old at the time. And so, I mean, I just loved to skate. You know, I would go fast and jump high and do my little split jumps and fall a lot, and, you know.
Yeah,
I
the
just
falling
loved
thing
it.
is good.
Yeah, and so it just kind of took off from there.
Wow. So Donald Jackson, does he still to this day take credit for you?
He should.
Likely.
And you know what? It's really cool because he's still a member at the cricket club where we teach.
Yeah.
And he comes in for every special event that we have. So whether it's our skating show or whether it's just to come in and check in on the kids. And, you know, he's in probably at least once a month.
Wow.
And it's so nice to see him. And we have his name up on the board because he's a world champion. And then I always tell the kids, you know, this is the guy that did the very first triplets ever in competition.
He did. And do you remember the story around that? He was so far behind. It was a Hail Mary. Yeah.
Oh,
Is that right?
I can relate. I know those Hail Marys.
Hail Marys. Yeah, but it was like he was so far behind, and it was in Czechoslovakia, right? Yeah. So he went and he threw the triplets, and what was crazy about him, which a lot of people don't remember this probably, was he was my hero for a minute because he rotated with his feet side by side, and then he could cross them, and he would jump in both directions. I mean, he was just a nut the way that he went after his skate.
Oh yeah, and he still skates.
And legend. Yeah. And he hasn't aged a day, which really ticks me off. You know, 'cause
I know.
I have.
It's interesting to hear this story, Brian and Scott, because, you know, we don't get to talk. We've known each other for so long. I mean, since we were teenagers, we've grown up together. But I had a memorable moment with Don Jackson too, Brian. When I skated at the Inlet Skating Club, it was a brand new rink. My mom and dad helped get it started. And so at that point, I don't know, I was probably 10, and he came out and did a little seminar and workshop with us. And it was interesting, you know, when you see a skater of that level come into your community and you see the magic that's possible, how inspiring that is. So yeah, I remember him well too.
Oh, cool. And your dad, oh my goodness, Tracy, your dad, I loved your dad. I mean, he was so interesting. He always had the beard, and he always liked to have his little drink, and then we'd sit and we'd talk, and and he was like the guy that loved boxing and ballet equally. He saw the just the quality and the athleticism in both of those extremes. You know, one where you're beating the snot out of each other, and the other where you're trying to do something aesthetically pleasing. But he was really kind of like that kind of Renaissance man that was really just broad in his interest. And I mean, how much was that relationship with him? Because your mother was more like the nurturer, kind of the steady, and always kind of like there and to make sure everything was perfect. But your dad, what was that? How was that relationship so important for your skating?
Well, I think, you know, with my parents had a bit of a slippery slope because unlike Brian, nobody really saw my talent early on. And so I had a ton of, or later for that matter, but I had a ton of desire. I wanted to be that skater. I wanted to be, you know, the one out there in the spotlight and wearing the beautiful dresses, etc. And unfortunately, I had a terrible time competing and with nerves and the whole bit. So they were really worried I was going to get my heart broken. But as you said, my mom was very nurturing, and my dad felt anything was possible for me. Absolutely anything. And so that's what he instilled in me. And the one thing they kept first and foremost is you're around good people. You love to do it. You're improving. It's healthy. We're in it for that. And so they were able to take the pressure off me in terms of results, because my results were up and down, to say the least. And to really see the value outside of just the competitive results. I failed my fourth figure test 7 times. I think I had the record. And then, I know. But then all of a sudden, my mom said, well, you just took a long time at that level. But then all of a sudden, everything came, you know, all of a sudden, you know, the jumps came, the other tests. But my dad was just like anything was possible. And he did love the arts, as you said. So he introduced me to a lot, and we'd listen to different musics. We'd, you know, go to the theater, whatever. But also he loved rugby. And so he had that kill or be killed mentality, right? And so it was like, you just get out there, kid. You just show those guys. So it was a real interesting contrast, and, you know, a contrast that both you and Brian are familiar with. So.
Yeah. And it was really wild, though, that with all those individual sports that you're doing figures, you're doing your jumps, you were swimming by yourself, diving by yourself. Those are all individual sports. What drew you to ice dancing?
Well, with my knee injury, my knee was having trouble standing up to the jumping. I was also 5'6", and most skaters in my day were 5 feet. And, you know, I was a little, basically the coaches told my parents that and officials said I was too tall, too old, and really not good enough to be in singles.
Oh, that's encouraging.
Yes, and of course, I loved to jump. I did. My favorite thing was jumping, and so my mom sort of lobbed a soft one at me and said, I've always thought you'd be good at ice dance. And it was, but anyways, I kind of ran out of options. And so I found a partner. And with that partner, I got to the Canadian Championships, but I also sort of saw that there was such a technical side to ice dance that in the day was totally ignored, and that there were hidden difficulties. In this day, of course, we see the value in the technique of ice dance. But so, Scott, I'm an artist at heart, as much as there's an athletic side, and so the opportunity to go out on the ice and tell a story. And just when I thought I was going to have to hang up my skates, and I think I was 18 or 19, I had no partner, career was done. Rob McCall, who was the Canadian champion and 10th in the world at that point, was looking for a partner. And guess what? He couldn't find anybody else. So he ran out of options, and I was it. And that's
the best thing that ever happened to him. Well,
and he, me, right? Yes.
Yeah. Well, that was, I mean, we'll talk more about Rob in a little bit. But Brian, I mean, you know, you coming up as well, from those first days on the ice show, and then obviously the competing started. And what were those first years in competitive skating like for you?
I pretty much won everything.
Yeah.
That was fun.
Yeah, it's always fun.
Again,
Winning is fun.
Again.
Everybody should try it.
But again, there would be times where I'd be the only one competing. So that was, that was an easy win. And, there would only be a handful of boys that were competing. So I was usually on the podium, let's put it that way. So that was kind of nice. But I loved competing, and my, my family was, so supportive, and they embraced everything. And, like all the skating moms in the world, they drive you from rink to rink. They sit in the stands, you're a lot of back seats, a lot of tears, you have to feel for some of these parents when, you have a bad session at the rink. They can't say anything right. They can't say.
Well, they're there to hug, right? I mean, that's their main thing, right? Just hug. Don't say anything. Just hug me right now, because I don't want to. It's just not going to work. But no, it was just your mom who was kind of like point. Your dad was always there.
Yes.
And always there with a joke.
Butch.
Always there to Butch was. Butch always had at least 5 jokes in his hip pocket that he just couldn't wait to share.
Well,
and he was awesome.
The great thing with my folks was that at all of these competitions, whether it was regionals or sectionals or nationals, whatever it was, they would always get a hospitality room at the hotel. So like space into their own room, or they would just use their own room. But they would bring all the other parents into the room, and they would have like a little cocktail hour, and basically it was just to kind of get the other parents out of their kids' hair, and just to and my my dad well, and he would always be like, I'm just so proud of these kids, and aren't they doing a great job? And just imagine that for them to go out and compete at this level, and he would just get all the parents calm down, and they'd have a nice time, and put everything into perspective. So it was fun. And the one rule was that we always, whether it was Tracy and Rob or Barb Underhill or whoever, we always had to, after the competition, of course, we'd go find our own fun, but the rule was we always had to do a little drive by the room. And see all the parents. So they could say, see, first of all, that we were okay. And it was kind of fun to kind of socialize a little bit with our parents, and see them having fun. So it was good. It was good for everybody. That's one of my greatest memories of my father at competitions.
Oh, I swung by that room on many occasions, and it was always fun. And it was just, your parents were truly amazing. Both of you guys had spectacular parents that really just poured into you as people, and allowed you to grow, and allowed you to experience, and allowed you to be you, without all that kind of micromanaging. And no, this is what a good skater looks like. But, it's like, they managed you. They brought you up, well and right. But I mean, they were really good people to be around, and just great for everybody around them. So I loved that. So now, as you're coming up, like, I remember when I was like really little, Tyler Cranston was, to me, the man, because of the explosive nature of his skating and how outrageous he was. But Canadian skating at that point, I mean, you guys had like, Ronnie Shaver, and then, Brian Pokar was coming up and doing his thing. So you had a lot of really strong role models. Who did you admire the most, as growing up as a single male skater in Canada? Who was like the guy that you thought that was who you wanted to kind of pattern your skating after?
It was a combination of Ronnie Shaver and Tyler Cranston. Yeah. So, I love the athleticism of Ronnie Shaver, because he was,
man, he was amazing.
And you skated with him too. You trained with him.
I skated with him. I took from him, 78 summer when Carlo couldn't stand me and shipped me off. I went up to Canada and Hamilton. Right? Yeah. Neil Carpenter. I have never laughed so hard on the ice as I have with Neil Carpenter. He was
so the coach of Ronnie, and so I really loved the athleticism and the speed. And he was like, just that athlete, he didn't move his arms past his shoulders, Never. But then there was the other side of Tyler Cranston, which I also admired. and maybe secretly kind of like really admired that style of skating. So those two guys really were the ones. And I competed against Brian Pokar, so I had my share of Bryans. And and he was kind of across between, he was a cross between the two of them, because he was athletic, and then he also had a beautiful artistry and a style. So yeah, I mean, I come from really great stock of Canadian figure skaters to look up to, starting with Donald Jackson.
Yeah, and it's just all those stories that Toller would tell, about, how he and Ellen Burka would be like this, and just fighting over everything. And he was a mess, and he'd go in and change his costume after the warm up because he had a horrible warm up. And then, I mean, all those stories, those stories need to be told, and they need to be really just celebrated, because spending time with Toller Cranston, of all people, and Rob McCall for that matter, it was like side-splitting humor, always.
Yeah.
And just their level of commitment and artistry and all of that. I mean, you guys really got to experience the essence and the best of all of that,
I think all these folks that are watching and listening to this event right now should go on YouTube and look up Toller Cranston, because there's probably some young skaters there that probably have no idea who we're talking about. But, he was the pioneer of artistic skating for men, and he was really unique. So my suggestion is to go on YouTube and take a look at Toller Cranston.
Yeah, and when you talk about authenticity as a person, as a performer, and really finding out what makes you tick, that's what Toller did. He had this. He couldn't be anything else but himself, and it wasn't always popular at that time in the sport. So, yeah, it wasn't.
Well, I remember
it
one
wasn't.
Story I
when
tell
he first came out, he took a lot of hits. Yeah. Sorry.
Well, I mean, throughout his career, because he was so avant-garde and so unique. But he won the world freestyle gold medal 3 years in a row, and then that was broken up by Terry Kubica, I think, when he was doing backflips and stuff. But Toller, it's like that one story about how he and Ronnie Shaver were like head in head, and they were going, one was the artist, the other was the pure athlete, and they were kind of going like this. And then Toller had a horrible warm up, changed his costume. He would tell a story time and time again. And then he knew he was going to absolutely bomb. He heard 5'9", 5'9", 5'9", 5'9", 5'9" in the 6-0 system, and he knew he was going to lose his Canadian title to Ronnie Shaver. And then the introduction happened, where they said, "Ladies and gentlemen, our next skater from the whatever Toronto Curling, Cricket, and Skating Club, the one and only Toller Cranston." And he said when he heard that introduction, it changed the air in the room. And he said he just took the ice. And he said he never skated better. And when the marks went up and he started getting 6.0s, he couldn't contain himself. And he said he knew that there was a hand on the back of his costume preventing him from taking the ice, but soon he slipped through it. And he went out, and while the rest of the marks were given, he did 10 Russian split jumps in a row during the marks. Who does that, right? I mean, who does that?
Oh my God.
So, again, Brian, you broke some pretty significant ground technically in skating, and Doug Lee was your coach, and he was a young man. He was a young coach. Were you his first major champion?
Yeah, I started working with Doug when I was 8, because that was right after the conversation with Donald Jackson, and Doug Lee was coming through our town to give private lessons. So my mom signed me up. So I was with him for my entire career.
Yeah.
And he was only 22, 21 or 22.
Oh, he was a baby, yeah.
So he was a baby. He had just started coaching, and he lived at the YMCA because he wanted to save money for a Corvette. And he drove around from rink to rink. How funny is that? And,
that's great.
But I stuck with him through my whole amateur career. Very similar to Brian Boitano too, with Linda Lever. Yeah. They started at the same time, and he was with the same coach all the way through as well. And there's something to be said about that. Of course, you have your ups and downs, and like any relationship.
Oh, yeah.
But you stick it out.
Yeah.
and everybody, you know, we all make mistakes. He made mistakes. I made mistakes, but we got through it and we grew and we got better.
And there was pressure. I mean, when you really started to ascend, right? Was there some pressure for you to go to a more traditional kind of established coach?
Well, ironically, the push was for me to go to the Toronto Cricket Club and take from a more established coach, right? Yeah. So, and we kind of dug our heels in and said, no, like, we're going to do it our way. And my parents were very, very supportive of this. And the Federation really wanted me to move to the city and be with a more established coach, whether it be, you know, Louis Stong or
Ellen Burka
or Ellen Burka. I mean, they're all really great coaches.
Or Osborne Colson.
Yes,
right?
But we stuck our ground and we stayed. I mean, it's only a couple hours north of the city, but we were kind of small town hicks that were doing the best we could.
Well, it's not only a couple hours north of the city, it's a couple of feet of snow north of the city.
Well, yeah, it isn't the snow belt.
Big time. And Tracy, you were always now you were Western Canada, right? Which is like a totally different animal. And you and Rob started partnering together. And tell me about how those initial, I guess, first steps as partners, how those went, because he has a dynamic personality.
Right. Well, I think I came from BC, which is the West Coast, and he came from Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, the East Coast. So we met in Toronto.
5 time zones.
Right? Right. And I was just so excited, and I think he was too, that this was like a second chance. So we had a chance to find a new career together. And but I had met Rob the year before. I was at the Canadian Championships, and I was walking down the hallway, and I heard screams of laughter coming out of the hallway, and I thought, what is that? And so I stopped and I looked in the door, and it was all of the judges and officials. They were having a party, and Rob was sitting on the floor in the center telling these racy jokes. Anyways, I was shocked. The judges were crying with laughter. So that's how I met Rob. Anyways, I knew he was a big personality, but what a brilliant talent, Scott. And so he came really, and so when we started together, remember I said I was 5'6" and he was about 5'9", which is ridiculous. It's the height difference is not enough to make a good dance team. So when we had been on the phone discussing the partnership, I said to Rob, you know, I'm 5'6". Yeah, don't worry about it. I said, but I think I may be too tall for you. He said, look, there's a dance team. I think it was Karponasov and Linenchuk.
Oh, yeah.
Where he was too short. And so he put these elevator platforms on the soles of his skate. And he said, don't you worry, if that's the problem, then I'll put the lifts in my skates. So he ended up, I was too tall. He didn't put the lifts. I had to learn how to bend
I had to learn how to bend my knees, even the broken one, right?
Yeah.
But what a match. I mean, you guys broke some serious ground. I mean, you know, with all the Canadian championships, but you were the first ones to win Skate Canada, the international competition, right?
You know, it was so funny because if you look at us, it probably never, you know, you wouldn't think in a million years it could happen, but within 6 months together, we won the Canadian title and then top 10 in the world. And then, we ended up having incredible success. I surprised everybody, including ourselves. So, wow. But you know Rob. And so here's Rob, a nice dancer who would do triple jumps. Well, back when we skated, the pair skaters didn't do triple jumps. Mm-hmm. And, you know, so this guy was enormously talented, athletically and artistically. And so I just kind of was along for the ride, and I had that work ethic and could help to sort of manage him a little bit, you know. We brought out the best in each other, so.
Well, and I know just Rob was sort of spontaneous, if I may.
Not sort of.
Yeah. He was very in the moment, and he was always like, there was always joy. There was always going to be some party or some joke, and you know, wide mouth frog joke all the time. and it never got old ever, because every time I heard it, I would cry laughing. And it's like odd that you hear a joke so many times and it would still be hilarious. But so, everything was kind of grounded on you to kind of like, the way I saw it was, you were the one that sort of said, here's where we are, here's where we're going, here's what we're doing, and this is how we're going to pull this thing off, even though he was sort of the creative guy behind all of it.
And Scott, it's interesting that, we're touching on a couple of things here that it's sort of, continues in the thread to where Brian and I are now. First of all, when Brian was asked to move to the city of Toronto and find, another coach, he and his coach said no, but they would come in and get some figure lessons. And Brian became my roommate. And so Brian and I met at, 18.
I remember that now. Yeah.
And then the following year, so he would come in, and so and he'd sleep on the couch. I had this little wee basement apartment, and and so we had a blast, and we got really, really close at that time. But the other thing was, Brian and Rob and I used to really help each other, as even when we were competing. Just support, and Brian and Rob had a fantastic friendship. But one of the things that we learned, and I think has made us better coaches, is that Rob was so unique. He did everything wrong. Like, when I started dancing with him, his technique was wrong. And then I realized the technique I'd worked so hard to learn, his free form was better in so many ways. So you sort of reinvent that. His motto was work hard, play hard. Yeah. And so here's a guy who could go out and party and live the life and do the whole thing, when really athletes shouldn't do that. And, and so, but I have a Rob story, because I was this like hardcore trainer. Like, we needed, and the run-throughs, and you can go out, but don't you dare go out on a skating night. And I remember it was a Thursday, and
That's a skating night.
When he came into the rink that morning, his eyes were a little bleary. Don't forget, he was 20, so he'd been out the night before and had imbibed in too many things and not had enough sleep. So when we were doing that run through, I'm looking at him and I'm really mad. And in my head, I'm thinking, I'm going to get him. So the music ended, and I looked at him and I said, that was terrible. We're doing it again. A double run through is a killer, right? Nobody likes to do it. I was going to punish him, Scott. Put the music on again. We did the whole program. We stopped. I'm dying. He looked at me and he goes, that was terrible. We're doing it again. But to fast forward, when Brian and I ended up working with different athletes, and like a Yuzuru and a Javier Fernandez, would be two examples, because of Rob, you need to make room for personalities, and you have to have a certain amount of discipline, but not everybody's the same. And what I would thrive on is repetition and consistency and hardcore technique and foundation. If that's all Rob did, that would kill him. That would snuff out that light. So I had to make room for that artistic genius and brilliance, and we had to find the strengths. And that's been the same with our students. We have certain guidelines that boy, you have to be able to work. If you're not going to do the work, then don't show up. But there's a bit of a range that we can usually get them to where we want them, but some take a little bit longer.
Yeah, and again, it's meeting them where they are, which is what you guys have done so brilliantly. I know, Brian. There it is. Oh, that's so great.
Do you know where that was from, Scott?
That looks like Stars on Ice.
No.
No? Where was that?
The summer, where you did some summer shows. San Diego, SeaWorld.
Oh, that's right. Oh my God, you guys all shared the apartment. So that was like SeaWorld. Those were fun shows.
Right?
Those were so much fun. Yeah. I felt almost guilty for getting paid for those, because it was so easy, and it was just like outdoor skating in San Diego in the summer. Okay, pinch me. I'm like, yeah, it was really fun. So Brian, let's go back. I want to go back, because we competed against each other back in the day. And I know I look a lot older than you, and it's just time, and a unique hobby of collecting life-threatening illness, which it's like, but when we like the first time I really saw you and saw you was 81 Worlds in Hartford, and I made the mistake of watching you practice, which wasn't really a good thing, if you're trying to like get to a podium at a world championship. And then there's this kid, and he's like young, and he's doing triple axel, like, and I'll just say it, I don't want to take anything away from Vern Taylor, because I competed with him too. And he did triple axel in 78. He was the first man to be given the credit for doing triple axel. But, he landed it for about 3 or 4 feet, and then he turned out and kind of went like that. He got around backwards, and that was great. But your triple axel in 81, nobody'd ever seen anything like that before. And there was all this and I was like, I remember I had my fingers in my ears, and I was in a hallway with a stairway way back by the Zamboni pit at Hartford Arena, because I didn't want to hear it, because I thought it would totally psych me out. And I had my fingers buried in my ears, and I was going la 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 la, and it was wah, and I was like, okay, that was really good. It was obviously a Swiss triple axel, which it was. I mean, you ushered in that whole kind of next phase of triple axel jumping, and it was extraordinary that you set that stage. You did that. You were the first.
I guess I was, and that was my first really big competition, and I had just started landing it the year before. So I think it was, I had landed at nationals that year, and it just became kind of part of my thing. But at the same time, it was when you take on a new element, then you've made a commitment to landing it every time. And because it was so new and it was unheard of, and it was really fun. It was fun to go to competitions and do a practice. And I would never have my kids do this now, but when we were kind of green. So I went around and I would do, 25 triple axels, because I could.
By the way, that was 24, and here comes 25, in case you don't know that I do it all the time. Yeah, I just want to show you. Yeah.
It was the one trick that I knew everybody would be watching, so I wanted them to watch me as much as possible. So, but then at the same time, then you're committed to doing it. So then the media would be making a big deal about it. So sure, it's fun to kind of be one of the first to do something, but then you have to keep doing it, which I think for the most part I did.
Yeah, you did. I mean, throughout that 4-year period.
Yeah,
I mean,
you had a first to sport.
You chased me out. I mean, it worked. It's like, but I remember, and I'll go back. I mean, you were doing this up the ladder. Where were you in 81? When did you end up?
I came sixth.
Sixth. Okay, so that was, and then the next year in 82.
I was fourth.
In Copenhagen. Fourth. Okay, it was really interesting how from 81 to 82, the podium, I mean, the second to seventh sort of flipped. And then you were obviously on your ascension. I mean, everybody saw you, they saw you coming. They started to get the idea that maybe there was another Brian on the horizon. And then 83, we get to Helsinki. And I know, Tracy, you weren't feeling great in Helsinki. I'm just joking. That story is not going to be told. But,
and some asthma.
But in 83, that was a big breakthrough year for you. I mean, you were totally set yourself up, for that next Olympics.
Yeah, I was kind of I was always higher in free skate. So, I was, in Hartford, I was, I think, 9th in figures, and then Copenhagen wasn't great. I was 12th in figures, and then Helsinki, I think I was 8th in figures, and then the next year at Olympics, I was 7th in figures. So it was always an uphill climb, and I had to go out and, win a short or a long or both, or, to be at least in the top 3 somewhere. So that was kind of, that moved me up, and it's all you can do, right? So
yeah.
That's what you
When
do.
I remember, I'm going to tell this story because it was so fun. So 83, Worlds. We get through it. You did great. You're on the podium. Everything was great. We go through the whole European tour. We spent a lot of time together on that. And then the last night of the European tour in 1983, it was us. It was you, me, and Joe Sabovchik.
Yeah.
And it was really late or early, depending on your perspective. You know, for some people, 4 a.m. is late, and for others, it's early. So for us, it was right on time because we sat there and we just said, wouldn't it be great if it were the three of us on that podium? And I remember, you know, I showed up at Sarajevo thinking, you know, it's like, okay, I'm ready. I got my strategy. I got to be top 3 in all 3 events, and then it'll be tough for me to lose it, blah, blah, blah. And then I go to my first practice in the Skanderia 2 rink, which was that super white ice that you could hardly see because the lighting. And I went out and I did my long program run through knowing you were in the stands. And I did a clean run through, and I look up at you and you looked at me like, is that all you got? Really? And I was like, I'm not going to win the long program. I have no chance whatsoever. So it's like, okay, figures. I got to win figures. And so we were able, and then as the ceremony happened, you know, Joe was the first one out, you know, then you, and then I came out, and then Joe looked up at us and he goes, Garmisch. And
Right.
it was like, yeah, it was like that dream we all thought to dream came true in that moment.
Yeah.
And it was just awesome.
It was awesome.
It was so, the one thing I'm most grateful for was that I got to share that moment with you, and to this day, Joe. I mean, you know, Joe was a little kid. He was kind of always following us around, you know, into trouble. But it was like, and then it was your turn. It was like that next 4 years, it was going to be you and Fadeev, who was very competitive at that time, and Brian Boitano. And yeah, it was magical. I mean, it was just really extraordinary, those competitive years. And I know first year in Tokyo, Fadeev won everything. I mean, he just stormed through and just won everything. And then the next year, Boitano won the Worlds. And then in '87 in Cincinnati in the US, you came out and just laid it down and won your world championship there, which was awesome. But I remember there was a spot on that podium that you were just joking around, and you stayed. You were introduced and you stayed. You know, the first one out was the world champion. You came out, and then you went to the second place podium, and you stayed there for a while.
Yeah, yeah. That would, of course.
Oh no, I'm up here. Okay.
Right. I kind of got used to that spot.
Yeah.
It's my nickname, right?
But then okay, when then you and Brian, you know, the big, you know, the Olympics, which were great for both of you guys in '88. But I'm getting through because I want to get to the next part of our careers, which was Stars on Ice and everything else. You know, I remember I went to you at that World Championship in '87. It's like, we're doing this thing called Stars on Ice, and I want you to have it in Canada. It's your deal. And so you were the founder of Canadian Stars on Ice. You and Rob and Tracy ushered that in to reality in Canada. Yeah.
I remember. That's what got me through the next year, was just, I know that I have one more year left. I can be with all my friends on Stars on Ice.
It was so much fun. We just had a blast with all those years. But, you know, it's just, as anything, you know, life happens. And Rob got sick. You know, in those first years as a professional, and you saw him through. I mean, you really saw him. Both of you guys were an extraordinary blessing. You know, he came in and he did choreography for us, and it was tragic. I mean, I don't know how come you guys feel about those times, but they were really hard.
It was hard, but it was a natural thing to do, and it was at the beginning of the AIDS epidemic, and there were, you know, we all of us, we lost a lot of friends, and Rob was, you know, very close, and Tracy and I and Rob were a tight-knit little family, and so that's what you do. And it was the first time for me to experience loss of someone that close to me, and my parents were still alive then, and siblings, and so grandparents, and so I had never experienced that before. So he needed us, and we were there for him. It was natural.
And the hardest part though was, Rob had such a joie de vivre, and you wanted to believe that could go on forever.
Yeah.
That it was, so it was really tough to watch. And as Brian was unbelievably strong and there for us right through that, particularly Rob, but also in that partnership we had where I was able to take care of him and show him the way. All of a sudden I couldn't. And, to watch him and the way he handled it, Brian, his sense of humor, he never lost his sense of humor. He never lost his sense of play. We to this day, we talk about him, and I believe he's in our work. I believe I believe he's our angel that brought us back together, in the role. And whenever we start to really crack up and laugh, we'll often look at each other and we'll go, Rob.
So. Well, it's like one of my favorite stories was, he was fighting, and Beauregard, his dog,
yes,
tragically passed. And every time you brought it up to Rob, he would get a little emotional. But I remember that. Do you want to tell this one with Tyler? When Tyler was standing next to him, and somebody came up to Rob and said, "Oh, Rob, how's Beauregard?"
And Tyler said, "Flat as a pancake," because he did slip out the door and got hit by a car. So
yeah, but that's Tyler's humor.
That's Tyler.
But I mean, obviously, again, it's like that's Rob, right? So
yeah,
you guys, you're coming to kind of like Tracy. You took off into this television business, which you're so amazingly great at. I know your first Olympics was 92. Yeah, the three
Thanks
amigos.
To you. Thanks to you.
Me. Yeah, I said to CBS, I go, if you really want quality in your ice dancing coverage, it's not me. It's just not going to happen. But Tracy is perfect for this, and so they brought you in, and you got your television start with CBS, and we had those fun years. And high on a hill, there's a lonely goat herd. And that was, all those the outfits they gave you and all that stuff. It was really fun.
I looked like Heidi in a couple of them, Brian. You didn't see a couple of the outfits I wore on CBS, but it was a real cute suit with horn buttons, shorts, and tights. And I was also working alongside Katerina Vett, and her designer, dressed her in totally different fashion. So I came out of the dressing room beside Katerina, and I said, how come she's dressed like a Catwoman and I look like Heidi? So
so you're totally into your television career was taking off. You started doing things in Canada. Brian, you were still performing, and then all of a sudden, the coaching situation at the cricket club just fell apart. And the way I remember it, they came to you and they said, hey, can you help out a little bit just in the interim? And then this whole new coaching thing started. I mean, tell me about that. I just really want all of our kids to know about that.
That's pretty much it in a nutshell. And I just remember, and the timing was perfect. So I think I was like 44 years old, and I was still doing shows, and I just remember like standing like opening number, and there'd be like the spotlight would come down, and I'd see my silhouette and the special, and my hair was huge, and I just remember, and I remember like standing there just going, I'm kind of getting tired. And then, I mean, really around that same time, I got a call from Tracy saying that they need someone to run the skating section at the cricket club. Would you be interested? And I immediately said no, because I didn't have any experience really in directing a program. I had done a little bit of teaching, but I hadn't done any coaching. So And then she said, well, what if I do it with you? And I'm like, done.
Oh.
Done. I mean, let me think about it for a second. Okay. Yeah, it was like perfect timing. And the two of us were kind of green, but enthusiastic, and kind of saw this as a new chapter. And it was temporary. We only signed a 6-month contract just to get them going and to try to find
To
someone
help out.
to run the place. And here we are now. It's been 14 or 15 years.
And I mean, the success has been incredible. Tell me about how you guys work together and the system you created at the cricket club to create the success that you've experienced.
Go ahead, Trace.
Well, it was interesting because our goal was not for it to be like a successful program in terms of international results or international prestige. Brian and I guess it comes down simply, we are connected by our love of the sport and the love of people. And we both were so grateful for our careers and loved the skating and loved to play. And we just sort of looked at it. It's a club, a private club, but we wanted a community feel to it. And our feeling was that skating is for everybody. And so whether you were our little power skaters or our adult skaters, the international elite or teenagers that are just loving the sport, it didn't matter what level. Everybody was important and everybody had a place. And we began with that, and it was like, we wanted to bring what we loved about skating, and both Brian and I just loved getting out and doing those stroking exercises. We loved artistry on ice. And we loved the ice show. We tried to bring things into the program, and it was really about skating. And so what was so wonderfully surprising was how successful it was in terms of it produced results. Like, you want to think that getting out and playing produces results, because that's what everybody loves to do. Discovering yourself in the sport produces results, because that's what's best for us. And we try to be cookie cutters when, it's all about only jumps, or if it's all about what, so we just kind of got in and played and loved it. And we came up with different exercises and blah, blah, blah. But I think at the end of the day, Brian and I have so many years of friendship, and then we were a really good balance for each other, because, with my life, I had 3 kids, I was doing the commentary. I wanted a place to play in the rink, and that Brian would, love the competitive side of it and getting out there with the skaters. So I just think we've been a good balance. Hey, Brian?
All right.
Yeah, and really our first student, we started teaching there was like April or May of 2006, and then there was this girl coming in to work with David Wilson for choreography. Her name was Yuna Kim. Her mom had asked if I would work with her. David Wilson asked too, if they want me to work with her. So I said, sure. And so we started working, and I guess she liked it. So then she signed up for our summer program. And then at the end of the summer, they had asked me officially to be her coach. And I still had some commitments in the shows, because the cricket club thing came on so quickly. So I was fulfilling my commitments, and I had one final year of Stars and Ice in Canada. So I thought, I need to wait, because I can't do both. And then they kept pushing it. I said, okay, sure. I'm going to try to manage both, and we'll try to make this work somehow. Both Tracy and I had to come up to speed with this new judging system. Yeah. Because we were a little bit behind the times there. I remember we went to the World Championships in 2007. So that was the end of our first season together. And she won the short program, and she had 72-point-something points. And so I'm sitting there, and the score came up, and she went like this, and I didn't know what to do, because I don't know what the 72 points. I don't know. So I get it, And then, but we had to get up to speed really quickly, which was fine, which we did. And she trusted us, and we worked with her for the next 4 years, and she went on to win the Olympics. But we learned something new every single day.
Mm-hmm.
And in that, I mean, it's what I love is that you just wanted to create a community, a joyful situation. You wanted to create, just quality wherever, for whoever, however, right?
Yeah.
And then this one skater sort of, came and said, oh, this might work for me. And then they went, but obviously that was sort of your entree into, now everybody wants to be in this world, your world. So how did you make that transition, and who was next? Who was the next one that came in and was the next follower, or after the first?
It's kind of that, if you build it, they will come.
Right. That was our theme.
Yeah.
That was our theme.
And I think what sort of drew some of the next group of skaters was that they could see the joy in her skating. She changed from being an athlete that was under the stress of having to produce medals and to train hard, and didn't realize that there could actually possibly be some joy in the process. Wow. And so she found that joy, and it came out in her skating. So that's when I think a lot of other athletes, they recognized that.
Right. It would probably be Adam Rippon, was it?
Adam and Christina Gao.
Yeah, but I have a Brian story, Scott, and it just sort of plays to, sorry, Brian, but no, it plays to our philosophy of what we do. So Brian had been coaching Yuna, and Adam wanted to come. And so he had a meeting, and he just said to Adam and his mom, okay, I can take you. I think it was like, it could have been November. It was really close
December,
to
it was right before U.S. Nationals.
Okay. And Brian said, I won't be able to go to U.S. Nationals because I'm going with some of our adult skaters to Ottawa to skate on the canal. And I can't back out and let them down.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But that's the commitment to the kind of the greater good.
Yeah.
And his commitment to our adult skaters who mean the world to us. And so Adam and his mom said, okay. Brian wasn't able to go with them, but yeah, so he and Christina Gao were the next.
Wow. And then from there, Javi came in, and
my
tell everybody about that first meeting with Javi Fernandez, because I think it's hilarious.
Okay, so first of all, we were skating, Brian, in the summer, and Brian and I do stroking classes at the end of the session. And so we put on the music, and Brian and I go to start to lead the class, and all of a sudden we realize that Javi's getting off the ice. And so Brian skated over and said, where are you going? He says, oh, I'm done. He says, but we're doing stroking. He says, yeah, I'm done. But yeah, so we sat down to meet with him because we like to get sort of a little bit of a plan of doing run-throughs and how a skater, we wanted to know how he liked to train. And so, because you can't all of a sudden have somebody do double run-throughs, if their magic is they want to do one and intervals or whatever. So we just started with, so how many run-throughs do you like to do? And he said, well, what do you mean? And I said, well, like when you're training, how often do you do run-throughs? He said, well, like in a year? And I said, well, okay, before Worlds last year, just give me a guesstimate. How many run-throughs would you have done in practice before Worlds? And he went, 2.
Europeans.
Including Europeans?
Right, Europeans and nationals.
So you had to make a few changes, right?
Right.
Oh. But at least we knew that's where you started, right? You can't, anyway.
And that's just amazing. How did Yuzu come in? How did that happen?
Well, we had one full season with Javi, and Javi really kind of bought into it quickly, and he improved and had some good results on the Grand Prix circuit. I think and he was competing head-to-head against Yuzu, and he was beating Yuzu. Mm-hmm. So I think, well, I know that Yuzu just wanted to come and train with Javi because Javi had these amazing jumps, and Yuzu wanted to learn more jumps. So I had a meeting in Japan. I went to Japan for something. I was, I think, choreographing one of the shows, and there was this big secret meeting that was being set up. So I literally got off the plane and then drove to a hotel across opposite part of town from where we were staying, so no one could see us. And I still didn't know who it was. Yeah. I just knew that there was a Japanese skater that wants to come and join our team. And I walked in and it was Yuzuru Hanyu and some of his people that were helping manage him. So, and I just said to him, because he had just been third at the World Championship. So I said, why do you want to do this? You're on a good run. He was junior world champion. And he just said, I want to come and skate with your team. And I want to skate with Javier Fernandez. And I said, okay, that's a good enough reason. and then I went back and I talked to Javi. So I said, I need to talk to Javi first before I commit to anything here. And I went into the rink and I said, Javi, there's a skater that wants to come. His name's Yuzuru Hanyu, as you probably know him. And he wants to come here. And so I said, what do you think? And he said, sure. That was it.
Yeah, he's such a highly stressed individual anyway, right? It's like, no, Javi, you need to be nervous now.
Right.
Why? Yeah, I'm having fun. He's awesome. Well, you guys have, man, I don't want to keep it too long because I know we're a couple minutes over, but I love you guys so much. You are my favorite people to hang out every Olympics. Brian finds one place that's his headquarters every night after the events. And if you find that, you find Brian every single night. And oh my goodness, we have so many memories together and you guys have created something truly spectacular. And I couldn't be more proud of you or happy for you. And it truly honors everyone that's been in your worlds from the very beginning. And skating has truly been blessed by your relationship and by everything you've done in our sport. And it wouldn't be professional of me if I didn't open it up. If there's one question from Andrea Joyce, who's watching, if she has one, that would be amazing. Yeah. Andrea, do you have anything that I missed or anything you want to add?
Where's Andrea?
Yeah, is she still there? I saw her earlier.
She signed off.
Oh, she did not. She's going to be so mad. I gave her a shout out and she's not here anymore.
I know. I can text her. Just scooted out, but if we're still looking for her, I just want to take a moment to thank you guys so much for being here. Brian, Tracy, seriously, this is so special. Really, really appreciate you guys being here, your expertise, just your wisdom, your experience. It's so awesome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Corey.
It means so much that you're here. Yeah, absolutely.
We love Corey, and you got to come down and visit us. I know I've been promising to come to Toronto as soon as they open the border and we don't have these little corona creatures around anymore. I promise I'll be there. I can't wait to come up and be with you guys, and you got to come out.
Come there too.
Yeah, we'd love to come there.
Yay!
We've got national championships in 2022, so you might find yourselves here anyway.
Right.
Olympic year.
We'll see you then at least.
Okay.
Thank you guys. Thanks, Scott. This was a really great conversation.
Thank you. Stay well, you guys. I love
everybody.
You so
Stay healthy. Thanks for being here.
Brad and everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yay.
Yay.
Love
you guys. Love you guys.
Love you.
I'd like to see all these little guys. Good night.